Checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
Thank you, Elizabeth. First of all, thank you everybody for coming out today. I appreciate you showing up for us. The whole goal of this talk today is to kind of give some orientation, hopefully, to those of us who don't have as much experience with the advertising industry as it applies to mobile and apps and games, and maybe get a little bit more granular with how studios actually kind of think about engaging that industry and how they work with it internally. The $18 billion number up there is an interesting one. The IAB put out a report this morning with another kind of summary of those numbers. It looks like $15 billion is just the display, so video and interstitial kind of ads, the ones I think we're all familiar with here. There's another $15 billion that comes from search advertising, which are on mobile, which is just Google search results that are paid results. So it's really a $30 billion industry or more, but the kind of part of it that applies to us is $15 billion, which is quite large. But the gentlemen up here with me have all been working kind of on both sides of the table for a while, both as advertisers and ads publishers, and have engaged ads companies for the past few years, working I think with quite a few different vendors and have quite a bit of experience that hopefully you guys will enjoy listening to. I don't know how much of an intro you guys want. We've got the names already, but maybe if we say just a touch about what you guys do internally and where your experience has been, just keep it kind of brief, and we'll move into the questions after that. Do you want to start, Spiros?
Cool. Hi, I'm Spiros. I work for SEGA. I'm responsible for the App Store optimization stuff, user acquisition / spending money. And for some time, ad monetization equals making some money. So that's pretty much it.
I'm Kenneth, working for a little studio at Vancouver. And so I'm in charge of monetization. So everything, ad ops, live ops, in-game economy. But I was on the UA side as well. So now that finding really hard to, picking all the money and give it all to the UA team to spend it, it's really painful for me.
Hi guys, my name is James Peng. I'm the head of mobile app acquisition at the Match Group. Match Group comprises Match, OkCupid, Tinder, Plenty of Fish, and 40+ dating apps, or dating just properties across the board. I'm recently joined, but when I signed up for this panel, I was actually at a company called Stormate, where I was head of user acquisition and ad monetization.
Cool. Just to get a feel for the audience here, how many of you guys are app developers or come from a studio? Show of hands. Okay, cool. You've got a good percentage there. Vendors in the room too, just to see. Okay, about equal. And how many people here have actually gone through the process of actually vetting ads companies and either integrating them in their games or otherwise spending money with them? Show of hands. Okay, a lot more. Cool. That helps us kind of contextualize, I think, our conversation. So to kind of start up, I think one of the things that I'm kind of getting right into a little bit of a granular thing here, but one of the things that I find that studios have a bit of a philosophical problem with sometimes is the control that they have over their ad stack, and I'm talking on the monetization side. Control as in who's advertising in the game, how you're able to actually granularly control when, where an ad is showing, how it's showing to a user. How much do you guys feel like you have control over the actual ads ecosystem when it comes to integrating in your experience in your actual apps? And we don't have to go down the line. Let's make this a conversation too.
So I guess you always want to have more control for sure, and that comes down to how much your designer is involved in the whole process. And if your designer is not part of the process. I think it's always hard. You can always just pick an SDK and just drop it in, put a button into the storefront, and hopefully hope for the best. And usually that's not really going to work. We always say, right, how many people actually go to the store to get free stuff or to get paid stuff just to find free stuff. So it's not rarely happens. So you have to be. It's all about core gameplay. So the more control you have, the more success we'll find. I think it's a struggle. It's a struggle between internally and externally. I think competition-wise, they don't really share a lot of information because they don't really tell you who the pubs are a lot of the time because they don't want you to go directly to them. But you just have to, from the nuggets that they give you, you just work with them. Like what kind of genre you have is working well. What kind of if they have a pub ID, just say, hey, this pub ID is giving a high eCPM. Can I get more of these kind of ads? Just work with the pubs, and most of the account managers are pretty good to work with.
Let me clarify the scope for a little bit. So you're talking about ad monetization, right? And let's say you have a mediation platform or SSP in there, how do you control what's being shown, right? Yeah. So I have to put on my gaming hat here when I was at StoreMate. And basically, I guess there's kind of two extremes. On one extreme, you can control. You can say, I just want to do direct deals and only work with the people that I want to show ads on, and kind of vet them individually, and that takes quite a long time, right? On the flip side, you can say, hey, I'm just going to open up to all the DSPs and run MoPub across everything and allow every advertiser on there. And so you kind of need to decide where you want to be on that spectrum. Like, do you have enough of a sales team internally to individually control every single one that shows up on there and individually vet every single ad? You can do that, or else you can just say, I want max volume, max fill, and max revenue, and try it and go the kind of opposite route. I think obviously the right answer is dependent on your strategy and kind of where you want to be on the monetization scale and how sensitive you are. For example, at StoreMate, we're very, very sensitive to kind of directly competitive games, such as, like a SGN or Candy Crush. Most likely didn't want to sell directly to those guys, right? Even though the CPMs would be pretty strong. So what we did was, it was a very whitelist type of approach. So we controlled, said like, hey, these are the guys. Non-gaming guys come ahead. Gaming guys will vet you in individually and kind of whitelist instead of blacklist. And then it didn't come down to the point where we needed to vet each of the actual ads, but that's possible too. I would say it just depends on your level, like what you're looking to achieve as a publisher.
So it sounds like you actually had the ability to control in a fine-grained way who is actually showing in your game.
Yeah, for example, on MoPub, it can be very granular. Like you can see a list of every single pub on there and decide, I just want to allow these guys or I don't want to allow these guys.
Yeah, we're following the same more or less policy. For SEGA, we care a lot about the experience of the user, right? So we don't want to show any obscene content. We don't want to show any casino games. Because we don't feel our audience would like that. So we're very careful that those types of ads are not being shown in our games. From that point on in MoPub, we do have the ability to whitelist and blacklist partners, but we've only done it if we have gotten complaints about the type of ads. And I think that an issue that we've found is that on the MoPub platform you can do it, but we would like to see a better way of sifting through the ad content and being able to actually see what's being shown. So far, I haven't seen a good solution for that.
When you say sifting through the ads content, you mean the actual the creatives themselves that are being shown?
Yeah, because right now there's that possibility, but it's just not well visualized, and it takes too much time. And we would like to have something that's more user friendly, so that our people can go and take a look at it. But obviously we're very concerned on what is being shown in the game.
Do you find that users write in saying, hey, my kid just saw something that was weird, and maybe the campaign name looked right and the creative is not?
It hasn't happened to our game. I've seen it happen to a couple of other people. I've read this story about in some other game, a little kid seeing an ad about some obscene ad. I don't want to go into details, and then there was like a whole article about it, and it was that's the kind of situation we don't want to have ourselves in, and that's why we really try to we contractually obligate our ad partners to sift through the content and make sure that it's suitable to the audience that we have.
With contractual liabilities.
Yes.
Okay. That's
yes.
Oops. Oh, sorry. These are necessary. So shifting topics a little bit, I think a big question for a lot of studios when it comes to ad tech is build versus buy. And I think we've seen shifts back and forth quite a bit, and I think there are lots of strong opinions on this. I was just talking to a studio out here in the hallway who said, "Hey, we're building our entire stack across everything: attribution, mediation. We're doing everything, doing internal sales as well." I definitely gave him our side of that story and why that's difficult, but. What have you guys seen in internal discussions about that topic? And by the way, feel free to ask each other questions if you're curious about others' experience.
I mean, for our side, on the US side, as some of these guys know, we build everything in-house. On the ad side, we have found that that's not the optimal solution. Although we do have scale, we've seen that there's solutions in the market right now that would do a much better job than what we could do in-house. So I think that when it comes to monetizing, there's so many things that you have to take under consideration, and some people have already solved the problem, and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel unless you're an Neanderthal. So on the ad side, we believe it's better to go with some solution that's in the market.
So my answer to that will be the first question is scalable or not scalable. Now, so is it something that you can continue to scale and you can continue to devote resources to it? A good example of this is attribution, right? I mean, it's easy to attribute and to to set up with one partner and start tracking that. But what if you suddenly have to do it for 10, 15, and then in hundreds? Like, can you continuously reach out to additional partners and can you scale that solution? You need to kind of adjust those individual unique parameters and all these things. Whereas if you were to use a kind of Tune, Kochava, etc. These guys have already talked to all these guys, all these vendors, and have already made these relationships kind of the right API flows and such. And so, when you build, it's not done. It's far from done. It's really, you need to continue to support this to then. Same thing for kind of continuous reporting solutions, API aggregators. There's a lot of different things that it's just not done. So the question is your scale large enough to merit you building it in-house? For example, if I'm a small indie, probably makes more sense to outsource that. Whereas if I'm a king or superstar, I'm buying on the scale that makes sense, economies of scale, and I want not only that, I want to protect my own data, right? So not only becomes eventually it's like, hey, I want to own everything in-house. I want to have my own view and my own sort of customized solution, and I want to own the data at the end of the day. So can you do it? Can you do it well? And can you scale it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think resource is definitely the thing. It's opportunity cost, right? Where can you use your staff to maximize the revenue overall? So if they spend all this time building out a back end, but then they don't have time to build up the actual game engine or whatever that is. And if you are there's a lot of good mediation company out there right now, and from this Casual Connect, from last Casual Connect, there's a lot more talk about mediation with company like Heyzap, Fuse, and Fiber. They all provide different kind of opportunity for like I would say an indie studio around 5 to 15 people, where they would just do a lot of work for you and account management, and you don't have to worry as much, and you just have to build a good, engaging game to optimize all those ad revenue.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're either making a game or you're building an ad network, right? You have to make your choice. So I think if you're a developer, you're better off trying to optimize your game. There's so many things you can do rather than trying to build something that's already been built.
Cool. So I just kind of an add-on to that one. Have you guys actually had experience building stuff in-house for any of the advertising stack on either side of the table?
I mean, So when for the ad side, we've built part of the reporting because we feel that's a part that has been severely lacking from most of the mediation solutions out there, and also part of the optimization that goes into it. Besides that, we haven't built anything on the monetization side. We've built quite a lot of stuff on the UA side.
For us, it's definitely building back like the analytics. So all the users that engage in an ad, how do they perform in the game? Like, do they still buy IAP? What do they buy? And how do we utilize those information to either show them more ads or show them more in-game offers?
I'd say back at Stormy, one of the examples of build was when tracking wasn't around. These tracking providers didn't really exist at this point, and we essentially had to individually server-to-server integrate with each of these guys, and that was a tough process. It was like it took us maybe hour, 2 hours, maybe more per partner, depending on how complicated it was. And, it was just some of you guys remember that time, but it was just a pain in the butt, and it's not scalable once we get to the 20th testing partner. So at that point, it's just it makes more sense to, when we switched over to, I think, Attune at the time, it was like, hey, the next partner, well, they're already integrated. We can set it up and, with just a tracking link. That takes 5 minutes. So easy. So, at one point, it just doesn't make sense to continue doing that. And it's just, your engineers just either going to get bored, quit, or just not going to, it's not going to be something that makes sense internally.
Actually, you just reminded me, in my previous company, we tried to build an RTB bidder. And that was like an interesting effort. The first effort we did, we tried it twice. The first time, the engineer who tried to do it, the backend infrastructure was the wrong one, so the system couldn't handle the pings. The second time, we built it the right way, and then we realized, okay, so now we built it, now we need to spend like $1 million to optimize it properly. So at which point, we're like, okay, let's go to someone who has already done this, and like save $1 million. So there's a lot of things that show up when you're saying, oh yeah, it's so easy to build it, and then you start building, and then you say, okay, this is actually not that easy. I hadn't thought of this.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. Like interesting use case is RTB bidding. Like you ask yourself, I want to build something because I want to customize around my way of bidding, and I want to win in the marketplace. Well, ask yourself at the end of the day, are you still going to do it better than all these other players who have kind of 30 engineers plus dedicated just doing this, and they have sort of big data sets behind it, kind of informing their buys and informing all these sort of IDFAs that are out there and profiling these users. Can you really beat that? It's one question I have if you're deciding to go down that route.
Yeah, I mean, I think just for like a last point, I feel like that the case that we do decide to build is when a startup comes up to us and say, hey, we built this thing and we'll quote you the SEGA price. And at that point, we're like, something we can build as this thing at like 1/10 of the price. In that case, then that's when we make the decision. When we say, this is easy, we can do it, it's a good idea, let's just go do it. But in every other case, it's better to just hire someone, especially if you want to focus on your on making games.
Cool. So we touched on this before about kind of deciding what kind of advertisers you kind of allow in your games and how to show them. But we've definitely had a focus, I think, over the past few years on CPI, cost per install advertisers who are either competitive games companies or other apps companies. Have you guys started getting any exposure to more brand-focused advertisers, kind of consumer packaged goods companies who don't have that kind of same performance focus for their ads?
I mean, we'd love to get as many brand guys as possible, right? But still, the majority of the buying is coming from the performance guys. For us, it's really we don't on the monetization side. We don't care if it's CPI or we just care about fill and eCPM. That's the only thing that we evaluate people. We would like to see more brand guys. I think that there's a couple of things that need to happen before we see more of them come in. I think one part is on their side, they need to realize what an opportunity it is and get more acquainted with how the mobile space works. So I think there's some learning that needs to happen on their side. And on our side, we need to add the specific targeting that they require that is lacking right now and they're used to from the web world. And that problem hasn't been solved yet. As soon as that solves, I feel like the brand guys will come in and they'll come in massively.
So I think that for us anyway, we work with a couple of agencies, try to get brand partnership, but it's kind of hard when your game is rated 17 and it's just full of blood, and about shooting terrorists. So that's really not working that well for us. But in the past, we have a bunch of sports game and where we have partnership with McDonald's or Pepsi, where they just take over like a in-game tournament. We found that very successful, and for reward video, definitely, I strongly encourage to find a partner that is dedicated to brand or have a lot of brand inventory, because as you think about it, the engagement is much, the user experience is much better. Instead of watching like 5 Clash of Clans video in a row or Game of War, then you want to mix it up so that people would more be engaged and eventually and they don't need conversion, right? So it's all by completed view, so it's always a bonus.
Yeah, I'd say, coming from my perspective, I just recently moved from gaming company over to brand, essentially, like Match. So, I'm following this thesis as well. I think the brand dollars are coming, and they're coming. They're not necessarily going to be uninformed, as you mentioned, as some people might think. We're doing very, very targeted performance buys with using our brand, and so I think that this is definitely. Like from a Stormlight perspective, when I was there, we welcomed it as well. Like we'd rather have brands and these non-gaming apps, non-competitors, on our app and making money from them as much as we could. So I totally believe that this movement is coming, that the dollars are there, advertisers are getting a lot smarter, and for example, we have a brand, we're not gaming, so any of you that have traffic, welcome the opportunity.
We should talk afterwards. Yeah.
Cool shot.
Well, there we go. Deal's made. So you mentioned agencies being a source of this kind of non-gaming focused representation in the market. From our perspective, we see a lot of them moving towards programmatic buying, on exchanges or having DSPs who are bidding for them. Do you guys have a lot of experience with programmatic integrations into your game, and what kind of goes into that consideration? Because I think programmatic as a sector of the advertising sector has been around for a while, but not necessarily very deeply understood, and actually not very well built out either, in my opinion. For mobile.
I mean, for us, programmatic is huge. It's core to our strategy and to the way we optimize things, because we have programmatic bidding on every part of every level of the waterfall, and that has helped us raise eCPMs considerably. The only part that we haven't seen programmatic being built out, and something we're looking forward to, is on the rewarded video part, because the rewarded stuff. And it's specific, it's game specific, right? What you reward and how do you signal that via an exchange? It's a little bit harder, but for us, programmatic is very important. It has been doing very well.
So I'll talk about it from a buyer perspective. I think that programmatic is it's a little overused buzz term, but I mean, RTB is a significant portion of the inventory right now. It's like, I would say, 15-20% of what's out there over in the mobile acquisition space. But there's just so much more in the traditional network side that needs to be transitioned over to more programmatic as well. Like one of my issues is that some of these networks are just so old school that I know some account managers are still putting stuff in this notepad, And so that's as far away from programmatic as you can get. And so what I'd like to do is kind of transition all my partners more towards that, towards being able to kind of bid on a true value perspective from us, and to be able to kind of communicate that on a programmatic basis. And so that's what my goal is to build out at Match, is to build that type of platform that you can bid dynamically and at the right price across not just RTB but everything. And that's why I view the only way to kind of progress programmatic and make that term true is to make it advance it across all supply sources as well.
Cool. So another shift of focus a little bit to metrics and measurement of ad partners. For the developers in the room, yeah, how many of you guys have been contacted by 5 or more ad networks in the past month or two to try them out? Show of hands. It's probably 100%, right? Yeah, and on stage it's probably higher than 5. How do you go about measuring what these guys are bringing to the table? Is there a consistent metric that you can apply across everybody, or do you have a more nuanced way of going about understanding what their potential performance looks like?
I mean, the first thing that you look at is eCPM and fill rate. After you look at that stuff, obviously everyone's going to say, yeah, we have great eCPM or we have great fill. They need to explain why they do have that. And the why is like, do you have some special ad unit that we haven't tried? Is it native? Do you have better targeting that you can do than other networks? So that's just the pure metric part. Then we have the part which is, do we trust these people to put their SDK in our game? Do we think the SDK is going to crush our game? Are our engineers comfortable integrating the SDK? Is the SDK going to operate properly? Then do we trust these people that they will not show any improper content in our games, or the content that they have is relevant to our clients? So all those things go into consideration when we're making a decision about which partner to use. And at the end of the day, it's we need to get a deal made. Are they willing we consider our inventory prime inventory, and they have to pay a prime price to get in.
So I think eCPM it's kind of a funny metric in a way, because you heard a lot about eCPM guaranteed, and they say that, hey, I could at least get you like $25, $30, whatever. But if they only give you like 1 fill a day, then it's not meaningless to you, right? So like how you need like 1,000 a day essentially to recoup like a $25. So you need to know, like, dig deeper into all those questions that Spiros just talked about. Fill rate is important. Where's the inventories coming from? Are they strong in US? Are you strong in Asia? Are they strong in Russia? Like, where is your audience? Like, are you globally strong, or are you just tier 1 strong? So I think that's very important. Memory consumption, it's we find it have a lot of difficulty in the sense that they say the SDK size is really small, but in reality, when it just ballooned up,
that's never true, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, I don't know any. Just disclaimer, I don't know anything about tech. These are like all of my engineer, when they just come to me and with their angry face, are like, do you know what you just did to my game? It's like, so I was like, oh, I don't know, like the rep seems nice, he took me to lunch, so I was like so and also don't be so short-sighted about deals, because deals end like very quickly, and then you have to take out your SDK, and then we investigate a new SDK. That's also very hard. Think about like long-term proposition. If you already have some ad network that you work with, when a new network approach you, basically ask yourself, how is this better than the other one? Like, how it differentiate? Is it because they have more brands? They have more like of the audience that you have in your game? Like, if you're, for us, right, we're very male-oriented games. A network came to us, it's like, oh yeah, we're very strong in casino, very strong in sports, and as we decided to try them out, and it's true, they have a very strong eCPM because of that. So we just have to find a right fit for yourself.
Yeah, so I'll kind of flip it on the demand side again and say, like, what are the kind of key KPIs that you look for? Well, one thing that I hear from a lot of advertisers, quite often, is that there's this inventory, or network A is crap or network B is crap, and they hear that a lot. But what I'm always going to say is it's all relative, and whatever it's based on the publishers, right? And if it's a good fit for you, that's what makes it like crap or not crap. And so, for example, for Match, like a game like, let's say, Subway Surfers, It's probably not going to do that well because it's not our target demographic, but it might do great for like a Candy Crush or something like that. So, you know, it's all relative. So to be looking at everything on a kind of sub-publisher basis and measuring against those KPIs, I can't tell you what KPIs to look at. For example, we look at, you know, cost per registrations, subscriptions, how many people winked at other people, you know, things like that in Match. And so things like that are more relevant to us. You need to craft your own KPIs around those core value points for you. So that's all I have to say is like know those value points, but be able to dissect the inventory that you're accessing, you know, very surgically.
Okay, so looking a little bit more towards the future in terms of, you know, where we're going to be over the next year or two, I'm curious about, you know, from your perspective, what kind of efficiencies you see available in terms of ad industry consolidation. There are tons of companies out there, as we all know. You know, we've all had the conversation with probably 70% of the conversations with ad companies at parties here. Is there an opportunity to kind of move that industry forward from a studio perspective, from a developer perspective, you know, on either side of the table, buying or selling inventory? And what would you like to see those companies do? And if this question's a little bit too abstract, I have other ones.
I mean, regarding consolidation, I don't think we would like that. I mean, we'd like to have a competitive market and as many people doing new cool stuff and being able to pick whatever fits the best for us. So, I mean, if you're seeing consolidation, that's not the great thing to see, right? Regarding on what we would like to see in the future from ad networks, if that's the question. There's a couple of things that we're really excited to see the next year. One has to do with rewarded video mediation. That's something that we want to see coming. I think Mopap might be looking into it. The other thing that we're really interested in is the way the waterfall is working right now, right? It's like you have one network here, and then you have another network, and then you have another network. You want to have like an automatic yield optimization mechanism where all the networks are in one line, and they get to bid. They all get to bid on the first impression of the first time, and that's a much more fair system. And that's a system that would raise our eCPMs. So essentially, it would change the way the waterfall works right now. So those are the two things that we're the most excited in.
So on consolidation, I would like to see probably the media buyer space consolidate. There's just way too many like small media buyers that are just really buying a MoPub. Like probably more than the amount of networks that are out there. So I really like to see those either go away, consolidate, or figure out who's actually good at it. Regarding kind of new tools that you mentioned, I have a lot of thoughts for new tools. One is I'd like to see more kind of cost reporting on the IDFA and on the user ID. I think that's kind of the next level in measuring return by user. So you have the revenue by user, why not have the cost per user and be able to differentiate between that? I think measurement by pub ID and sub pub is not good enough for the future. So I think eventually it's going to be like Facebook is onto one thing, which is like it's a user-based measurement. That's true. It has some merits to it, and that's the way we think of it as Match. It's user-based acquisition. So it's not just acquiring across a pub. Second is better fraud protection from probably attribution providers. Want to like push these guys to like kind of they're the ones that have all our data, and want to push them to kind of help us out and prevent fraud from happening in the first place. Got a lot of things, but those are just the top few.
So there's still a lot to be done, it sounds like, which is that's good. Okay, predictions. Next year at this time, what's going to be the thing that we're all talking about? I think mediation seems to be a huge trend this year. Lots of sponsorships, lots of conversations. Where are we going to be at Casual Connect 2016? What are we all going to be talking about?
Well, I think brand for sure. That I think we all wishing that it would happen sooner, but I haven't seen it yet. But I think integrating brand into we see a lot already with bigger IPs, but but just in general, I think brands integrating with games, how people interact with games every single day, should just they somehow some way will able to pick it up, and hopefully by next year they will. And I think that's something that I think will happen, and hopefully it will happen.
I think, yeah, brand stuff, direct deal stuff, and all the tools that enable those things. Specifically, more demo information. How do you marry the IDFA mobile information with the demo information that the advertisers actually want. I think that's the key for the next year, and a little bit more automation on the mediation side.
I think every year there's a new kind of theme and buzzword. And I think last year was attribution, which everyone said and kind of fizzled out a little bit. I think a lot of people tried. Some people found success more in the e-com side. What I see a trend being is it's really data the next year. And so I see a lot of people, what I call is like baby DMPs. It's essentially like people who have a piece of the puzzle. They have some understanding of users based on their collection of IDFAs and what they've installed sort of cross-user. And so everyone has a piece of that puzzle, and they're trying to put it together in different ways and to try to sell and get an edge on everyone else. I think that's going to be the key over the next year. And I think I've already had a lot of conversations, like your Publishers Clearinghouse, your Fixus, all these guys kind of release these like new I would say like persona-based targeting based on data that only they have. So that's kind of new out there. I think that's going to be very key for over the next year.
I mean, I feel like what Fixer is trying to do now is something that Flurry tried to do like 3 years ago, but it didn't work. They need to figure out a way to get that data from somewhere, right? They can't just like make them up because it's not available on mobile right now, and we know Facebook has it and Twitter has some, but everyone else, I don't know where they're gonna get it.
So like for that example, Fixus, what they're saying is we don't actually know the user, but we have these install profiles. We know everything that a bunch of the users, these 300 million users have installed over the past few years. And so they're trying to piece together that puzzle and get at least a part of the vision for who that user is.
Okay, so questions from the audience. Anybody have something burning that they just need to know from these guys?
Hi, like everyone, I'm very interested in brand coming to mobile. I think it's going to be a big opportunity for everyone. I wanted you to elaborate a bit more what were the things that were slowing them down from coming faster, because I feel like this year they really went on YouTube and they are very happy with their results on YouTube and Facebook. And I think it's time to move into games too. So what's your insight on that?
So I think the issue right now is the brand dollars is still coming from traditional agency, and they don't understand mobile. And until there is a agency that's big enough and the head honcho basically say, hey, this is the way to go, because the brand doesn't control the marketing dollar, right? They just give it to agency, hey, here's like $50 million, can you spend it with me? And then how do we spend $50 million the fastest? Oh, I could spend it, with Super Bowl ads or anything that is, that is costing a lot, right? So they're not spending efficiently, and once they realize that their dollars can go further, it's a long step. I don't know how we could speed that up. I think that's what the issue I see it is right now.
I see multiple issues. One is that the scale isn't there on the supply side. Like if someone comes and says, hey, I want to spend $50 million, people will be, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's going to take us a year and a half to spend all that money. That's the first part. The second part is that, the brand guys, they want to know who is seeing their ad, right? If they don't know who's seeing their ad, and we can't tell them with conviction who is the one seeing it, they're not going to spend the money. They're going to they're going to stay on the web where they know everything. So that's the second issue that we have found. The third is what Kenneth said, is we haven't seen, there isn't like an agency that does mobile for brand well. We've seen MediaBricks doing some stuff, HyperMX is doing some stuff. We haven't seen anyone else. Drawbridge is trying to do some stuff, but we haven't seen anyone do it well. Yeah.
All fair points, and I think I think the biggest one is just the understanding of mobile and how the ecosystem works and how it's laid out and how to even approach it. And so, you know, that's one of the main reasons why, you know, I was hired on at Match as well, is just to bring those brand dollars and bring an understanding of that market. And so, you know, we're coming. I'm coming. So we'll spend the money. It's a question of when.
Yeah, and then another thing is that you need to the CPI guys, they have somewhere to send the users to, right? If you don't have if BMW doesn't have an app that you can go and do something that's valuable to them, then why would they spend it, right? They need to generate something actionable so that they go tell their boss that, oh, I spent $5 million and I got this many people sign up for something, right? And telling your boss, if you're working at Coca-Cola, hey, I got 5 million people to download the app, it doesn't really make a big difference. I don't know. I mean, okay, I don't know what happens at Coca-Cola. I'm just using them as an example.
So my question's for Spiro and Kenneth. Dealing with the ballooning of ad SDKs, how often do you run into the limit for your download size, and what is kind of the sweet spot for number of ad SDKs to have integrated with an app?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've never seen the size of the bundle we've never seen the ad SDKs causing the size of the bundle being higher than where it should be. This is the product team's job to fix that. And there are lots of and if they want to fix it, they can. And there's lots of ways to go to lazy load after you've installed blah blah blah. We don't have a limit on the number of SDKs we integrate. For us, the fewer the better. But if we see value and if we think that it's gonna make money for us, we'll do it.
Question for you is just kind of what's your user base, right? How many DAU do you have that's ready to publish ads? Is it, if it's under 50K, then you probably don't need that many networks, right? You can probably work directly with one. You can probably get a deal out of it too. Whereas if you have, several million DAU, then you probably need a good mediation in place, maybe 4 or 5 different networks, things like that. So it's a question of, I think, scale and fill and objectives.
Yeah, definitely. For us, when we start with Qshot, we only have I think 5 or 6, and then now we have 12 or 13. And the reason for that is, as new network coming in, knocking on the door, you just need to try and to see. And like James said, if you have a big enough DAU and you look at the fill rate, it's wow, it's only 50%. How are we gonna fix that issue? So, but size is definitely an issue because it depends on where your game engine is built. I heard we have a game that's soft launch right now is on Unity. And that's really ballooning really fast with the new update. And I heard a partner appears that use Unreal, and it's kind of the same thing. So to your point, how many is enough? You should just have one that kind of differentiate. If you are strong on reward video, have a couple of the top tier partners, and then one has brand, just do brands, and then a couple of them just do games, and then one just cover everything, maybe in this smaller territories. Then just go from there. And if your DAU is telling you that you need more SDK, then means that your game is really successful. Then good for you.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the type of deal you can get from people, right? You can ask for a lot of stuff from advertisers, and they'll do it.
Really? Damn, I should ask more.
I mean, we've seen, on the US side, we're very interested to see where the traffic is coming from. So we take a look at the SDKs that are the most downloaded apps have integrated, right? And we've seen from the most downloaded apps the last 6 months, we've seen the top 100 most downloaded apps. There was one app that had no SDKs, 0 SDKs, which blew my mind, and they didn't have Facebook integration, nothing. And there was another app that had 21 SDKs integrated. And so you can see how people are doing it. If you're gonna monetize, if your main monetization strategy for your app is via ads, you'll have to have multiple ad SDKs. I don't see how you can do it another way. If not, then you probably don't need any, or you might need a couple.
I did see a couple questions in this other before. Have they been answered?
One quick question. What percentage of your installs are coming from ad networks, and where do you see that going over the next couple years?
I can't comment on that.
Ad networks versus exchange versus affiliates and Facebook. Are you talking about that general ratio? Yeah. Hard to say. I mean, ad networks are generally, I would say 40% or so. Probably decreasing on a relative basis relative to Facebook, Twitter, and Exchange.
For us, ad network is actually decreasing quite significantly, and it also depends on genre of your game. The casual game, or a game with big IP, then you don't buy as much, right? But then, for some game that's brand new, you want to start a new brand. I would say that I think, well, for our game, it's definitely less than 20 now.
Is that because you've achieved like a penetration in the charts where you're getting a lot more organic downloads?
It just doesn't back out.
That just doesn't back out.
Yeah, and a lot of the reason behind it is we're buying less is because we have more analytics than ever before. We have 4 data scientists that are working for us right now that build a system, allow every single network that comes in, what is the R1, R7, R30. Like they could track that within the first 2-3 days and make a forecast. And basically, is this going to back out? And usually make a very good, quick decision and say, okay, are we stopping the campaign? Are we continuing the campaign based on those numbers?
Okay, great. Any last questions before we wrap up?
And this can be quick. Do you think there's an opportunity? I mean, obviously everyone wants more brand, and I think one of the big reasons brand has a hard time is they can't get the data they need on every individual user. And as developers, you guys are seeing a lot of that data. You see how long people are playing. Do you think there's an opportunity to share that data so that maybe these advertising platforms can grow, take that data and sell that data better?
I guess the one issue I see with that is most mobile developers don't know who their users are. Like if I were to ask exactly who these IDFAs are, you probably can't tell me. So on our side, like for example, Match, we know everyone who signs up has puts in their age, what they're interested in, stuff like that. But I mean, again, from the publisher's side, you can't. Most often you don't know that, so you don't have that data at your disposal. Maybe you'll get it through like Facebook Connect or Facebook Analytics, but again, that's on an aggregate basis. What you need is that user level, profile of that data. And again, you probably only have a piece of that picture, whereas like a larger network has many more pieces of that puzzle. So that's a challenge at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's exactly what I would say. Yeah.
Okay, guys, that was great. Very informative. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate you hosting our panel today, Moderator.